At my granddaughter's graduation, she introduced me as the witch who lives in the back of the house. I laughed. And on Monday, I canceled the mortgage on that house. The spring air felt crisp as I sat watching Sophie cross the stage to receive her diploma. My hands ached from clapping, but nothing could dampen my pride. My granddaughter, the first in our family to graduate college, stood tall in her cap and gown, the sun catching her blonde hair just like her father's when he was young. I'd driven 2 hours despite my arthritis flaring up. I'd even splurged on a new dress, navy blue with small white flowers, and had my hair done. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. For once, I wanted to look like someone's grandmother rather than their housekeeper. After the ceremony, families gathered for photos. I stood slightly apart, waiting for Sophie to find me. When she spotted me, she waved me over enthusiastically. "Grandma, come meet everyone," she called out, surrounded by a group of young people in identical caps and gowns. I made my way through the crowd, careful not to bump anyone with my cane. "Everyone," Sophie said, putting her arm around my shoulders. "This is my grandma, Virginia." Then her voice shifted, taking on a mocking tone. "The witch who lives in the back of the house." Laughter erupted around me. Several of her friends chuckled, and one young man with a trimmed beard actually snorted. "Oh my God, Sophie, you didn't!" a girl with pink-streaked hair exclaimed through giggles. I stood frozen, a smile plastered across my face as something cold settled in my stomach. In that moment, I was grateful for my decades of teaching elementary school, where I'd perfected hiding hurt feelings behind a pleasant expression. "Well, every family needs a witch, doesn't it?" I responded lightly. "Someone has to keep the magic going." More laughter followed, but different now, relieved that the old woman wasn't offended. Sophie squeezed my shoulder before turning back to her friends, already moving on to inside jokes I wasn't privy to. As they chatted, my mind wandered back 8 years. Gregory, my only son, had lost his job during the recession. With a wife, a teenage daughter, and a mortgage they could no longer afford, they were on the brink of losing everything. I remember him calling me, his voice breaking as he confessed they might have to pull Sophie out of her private high school. Without hesitation, I'd sold my modest but paid-off home, the one I'd shared with my late husband for 30 years, and used the money to put a substantial down payment on a larger house where we could all live together. The agreement had been simple. I would help with the mortgage, they would have a fresh start, and I would have family around me in my older years. "It's a win-win, Mom," Gregory had said. "You won't have to worry about maintaining a house all by yourself anymore, and we can help take care of you as you get older." I'd nodded, picturing family dinners and holidays, imagining Sophie coming to my room for advice or help with homework. I'd envisioned gardening together, baking cookies, all those grandmother activities I'd been saving up since the day she was born. The reality had been different. "Earth to Grandma," Sophie's voice pulled me back. "We're heading to the restaurant for the celebration lunch." "Of course, dear," I said, adjusting my purse strap. As we walked toward the parking lot, Sophie chattered excitedly about her plans. A marketing internship in Chicago, an apartment with 2 of the girls I'd just met, a whole future stretching out before her, bright and promising. I listened, smiling at all the right moments, but that cold feeling remained. "The witch who lives in the back of the house." The words played on repeat in my mind. At the restaurant, an upscale Italian place, Gregory and Diane had secured a large table. My son stood to greet me with a quick hug. "Mom, you made it," he said, as if my presence were somehow unexpected, despite having RSVP'd weeks ago. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, settling into the chair Diane had pulled out for me at the far end of the table next to a high chair with a fussy toddler from Sophie's extended friend group. Throughout the meal, I picked at my pasta while conversations flowed around but rarely included me. Diane dominated the table, telling everyone how they'd sacrificed to put Sophie through school, how proud they were of their little girl. No mention of my contributions to Sophie's tuition from my teacher's pension. No acknowledgement that I'd helped raise her while they worked long hours, packing lunches and attending parent-teacher conferences when they couldn't. "Remember how you used to read Harry Potter to me, Grandma?" Sophie said suddenly. "You'd do all the different voices. Even Hagrid's." I smiled, genuinely this time. "You were obsessed. We went through the whole series twice." "That's where the witch thing comes from," Sophie explained, laughing. "Grandma would pretend to cast spells around the house, She even made me a wand for my 11th birthday. You were convinced your Hogwarts letter was just late, I added, warming at the memory. Diane's mouth tightened. Well, thank goodness she grew out of that phase and focused on something practical like marketing. And just like that, the moment was gone. As lunch wound down, talk turned to Sophie's move to Chicago, Gregory's potential promotion, Diane's plans to convert my apartment in the back of the house into a home gym once I didn't need so much space. I sat silently, fork pushing my tiramisu around the plate. They had never asked if I was planning to move. They simply assumed the space would be available soon. After all, what else would a 70-year-old woman need but a bed and a bathroom? They sighed. Ride home was mostly silent. Sophie had chosen to ride with her friends. Gregory drove while Diane flipped through social media on her phone, occasionally showing him photos that made them laugh. In the back seat, I gazed out the window, thinking about Sophie's words, about the way they'd all laughed, about 8 years, of slowly being pushed to the margins of a house I had helped buy. The witch who lives in the back of the house. By the time we pulled into the driveway, something had shifted inside me. A decision had formed, crystallizing with each mile we drove. I think I'll turn in early, I said as we entered the house. It's been a long day. Gregory nodded absently. Sure, Mom. We'll probably order pizza when Sophie gets home. I'll save you a slice for tomorrow. That would be lovely, I replied, already walking toward my quarters, what had once been a sunroom before it was converted into my apartment. As I closed the door behind me, I looked around at the space that had become my world. A twin bed pushed against the wall, a small dresser with fading photos, a rocking chair where I sometimes sat to read or knit, a tiny bathroom that had originally been meant for pool guests, with a shower so small I could barely turn around in it. I sank onto the edge of my bed, no longer able to maintain the smile I'd worn all day like armor. Tomorrow was Sunday. The banks would be closed. But Monday I would visit the bank, and then my lawyer. If they wanted to call me a witch, I'd show them what a witch could do. Sunday morning arrived with the smell of bacon and coffee wafting through the house. I stayed in my room longer than usual, listening to the familiar sounds of my family's weekend routine. I hadn't slept well. The term witch kept circling in my mind. It wasn't just the word itself. I'd been called worse during my teaching years. It was how easily it had flown from Sophie's lips, how naturally the family joke had formed without my knowledge. When had I transformed from beloved grandmother to household punchline? With a sigh, I finally emerged from my quarters, wearing my teacher smile as I entered the kitchen. Good morning, I said, heading for the coffee pot. Hey, Mom, Gregory mumbled from behind his newspaper. Diane nodded without looking up from her phone. Only Sophie offered a genuine smile. Morning, Grandma. Want some bacon? I saved you some. Thank you, dear. I took the plate she offered and sat at the small breakfast nook. How was the rest of your celebration? It was amazing. We went to this rooftop bar and... Sophie, Diane cut in sharply. Your grandmother doesn't need to hear about your drinking. Escapades. I bit back a retort. I'd taught high school for 35 years. There was little that could shock me. But Diane had always treated me like some fragile Victorian relic. It's fine, I said mildly. I was young once too, if you can believe it. Sophie grinned at me, but Diane merely rolled her eyes. Gregory remained hidden behind his newspaper. So, I continued, what are the plans for today? We're taking Sophie shopping for new clothes for her internship, Diane announced. That sounds lovely. I'd be happy to... Oh, we've got it covered, Virginia, Diane interrupted. Besides, all that walking wouldn't be good for your hip. My hip was fine. The arthritis mainly affected my hands, but Diane had been using my age as an excuse to exclude me for years. Of course, I replied, taking a sip of coffee to hide my expression. As they prepared to leave, Sophie hovered near me while Gregory and Diane loaded up the car. I'm sorry you can't come, Grandma, she said, her voice lowered. Maybe we could have our own shopping day before I leave for Chicago? The genuine affection in her voice soothed some of the hurt from yesterday. I'd like that very much, dear. After they left, the house fell silent. I wandered through the rooms, examining photos, most featuring Gregory, Diane, and Sophie. I appeared in remarkably few of them, despite having been present at most events. they commemorated. I paused at a particularly telling display on the mantelpiece, Sophie's high school graduation photo. I stood at the very edge of the frame, barely visible, while Diane took center stage beside Sophie. It symbolized my position in this family, present but peripheral, necessary but not celebrated. My reflections led me to Gregory's home office, a space I rarely entered. I wasn't snooping. At least, that's what I told myself as I gently opened his desk drawer, looking for the mortgage papers I'd signed 8 years ago. The folder wasn't difficult to find. Gregory had always been methodical with important documents. I spread the papers on his desk, reading through the terms I'd agreed to. My name was the only one on the mortgage. Despite our verbal agreement that Gregory and Diane would eventually take over the payments, legally, I was solely responsible for the house. I had made the down payment using almost all the proceeds from selling my home, and I had faithfully made every monthly payment since. They had contributed nothing. As I returned the papers to the drawer, my eye caught a stack of mail. A partially opened credit card statement showed charges for a vacation to Cancun scheduled for next month. My hands trembled slightly as I noted the total, nearly $6,000. For a family trip I knew nothing about. I carefully replaced everything and closed the drawer. Standing in that room, surrounded by the evidence of their lives, I felt strangely detached, as if observing strangers rather than my own family. I returned to my quarters and pulled out my own financial records from the small filing box under my bed. The numbers told a stark story. Over the past 8 years, I had spent nearly $350,000 on this family. Mortgage payments, property taxes, utilities, contributions to Sophie's education, even repairs for the pool I was never encouraged to use. All. From my teacher's pension and the savings my husband and I had accumulated over decades of careful budgeting. All given freely, out of love and the belief that family supports family. And what had I received in return? A converted sunroom, increasingly rare invitations to family meals, and the title of witch. I sat heavily on my bed, the documents spread around me like fallen leaves. A memory surfaced. My late husband, Robert, shaking his head as I described yet another of Gregory's financial troubles in his 20s. Vi, he had said gently, you can't keep rescuing him. Sometimes you have to let people face the consequences of their own decisions. I hadn't listened. Robert had died a year later, and my instinct to help had only grown stronger in his absence. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Found the perfect blazer. Miss you, Grandma. Despite everything, my heart warmed. Sophie wasn't entirely to blame. She had been raised in this environment, watching how her parents treated me. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the family had their keys. Curious, I made my way to the front door. My old friend Barbara stood on the porch, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob I hadn't seen before. Barb, I exclaimed, genuinely pleased. We had taught together for nearly 20 years. What are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by, she said, though her expression told me there was more. Can I come in? I hesitated, suddenly self-conscious about inviting her into a house that, despite my financial contributions, never felt like mine to share. Of course. Would you like some coffee? As we sat in the kitchen, Barbara studied me with concern. I saw you yesterday, she said finally, at the graduation ceremony. My cup paused halfway to my lips. You were there? She nodded. My niece was graduating. I was going to come say hello, but then I saw you with your family, and... She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. And you heard what Sophie called me. I finished for her. Barbara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Virginia, what's going on? And don't give me that everything's fine nonsense. I've known you too long. The simple act of kindness, a friend's concern, a warm hand over mine, nearly undid me. My carefully constructed facade began to crack. It's not what I expected, I admitted softly. When I moved in here, I thought. You thought you'd be part of the family, not the help, Barbara said bluntly. I flinched at her accuracy. They don't mean to, don't they? Barbara cut in. Because from where I was sitting, it looked pretty intentional. You know, Barbara continued, her voice gentler now. I saw them last month, at Bellini's. Gregory and Diane? I asked, surprised. Bellini's was an expensive restaurant in town. And Sophie, having quite the celebration dinner. You weren't there. No, I confirmed. They said they were having a quick bite after Sophie's finals. Barbara's expression darkened. It was more than a quick bite, Virginia. They were there for hours, and… She paused. I overheard some things. My stomach tightened. What kind of things? They were discussing plans for after Sophie graduates. Diane kept saying how they could finally reclaim the house once you moved to assisted living. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Assisted living? We've never discussed that. Barbara nodded grimly. That's what I figured, and that's why I'm here. I couldn't stop thinking about it after seeing you yesterday. You don't look well. Virginia, you look diminished. I wanted to deny it, to defend my family out of some misguided loyalty. But sitting there, facing Barbara's concern, the truth was undeniable. I had become diminished, a shadow in my own life. What are you going to do? Barbara asked. I thought about the mortgage papers in Gregory's desk, about the vacation they hadn't mentioned, about the nameless, faceless retirement home they were planning to ship me off to. I don't know yet, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. But I'm going to do something. Monday morning dawned clear and bright. I rose early before anyone else in the house stirred. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. Gray hair neatly styled, face lined with experience, but eyes that had lost their spark somewhere along the way. Not today, I whispered to my reflection. Today, things change. I dressed carefully in my best outfit, a navy blue pantsuit I'd bought years ago for parent-teacher conferences, but rarely had occasion to wear anymore. I applied a touch of lipstick, fastened my mother's pearl earrings, and slipped my wedding ring back on my finger. Small acts of armor. When I entered the kitchen, Gregory was already there, hunched over his coffee and phone. He glanced up, surprise, flickering across his face at my appearance. You're up early, he remarked, and dressed up. I have some errands to run, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Need a ride? He asked, though his tone suggested he hoped I'd decline. No, thank you. I've called a cab. Gregory frowned. A cab? That's expensive, Mom. I could drive you if you just wait until after my morning meeting. The irony wasn't lost on me. Him worrying about the cost of a cab while planning a secret $6,000 vacation. It's fine, I said. I have several stops to make. He shrugged, already turning back to his phone. Suit yourself. Diane appeared next, perfectly put together even at 7:30 a.m. Well, look at you, she said, eyeing my outfit. Hot date? Just some business to take care of, I replied, finishing my coffee. Business? She laughed. What kind of business does a retired teacher have? I smiled thinly. You'd be surprised. Sophie stumbled in last, hair tousled, still in her pajamas. Unlike her parents, her face lit up when she saw me. Wow, Grandma, you look nice. Where are you going? Thank you, dear. Just running some errands. Outside, the cab waited at the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, opened the docker for me. First stop, Meridian Bank, I told him as I settled into the seat. During the short drive, I watched the familiar neighborhood pass by, mentally rehearsing what I would say. I had been a pushover for too long, first with Gregory, then with Diane, and finally with Sophie. But no more. At the bank, I was greeted by Mrs. Chen, the manager who had handled my account since Robert died. She ushered me into her office, her professional smile warming when she recognized me. Mrs. Wallace, it's been a while. What can I do for you today? I need to make some changes to my accounts, I said, setting my purse on my lap. And I'd like to discuss the mortgage on my property. Mrs. Chen nodded, pulling up my information on her computer. I see you have 3 accounts with us. Your checking, savings, and the mortgage on the Cherry Hill property. Yes. I want to cancel the automatic mortgage payments from my checking account, effective immediately. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. Cancel them completely? Or would you prefer to adjust the payment schedule? Cancel them. I'll be making other arrangements for the property. She nodded slowly. I can do that for you. May I ask if you're refinancing with another institution? No, I said, my voice steady. I'm simply no longer going to be responsible for that particular financial obligation. Understanding flickered in her eyes, but she maintained her professional demeanor. I see. Well, that's certainly your right. The next payment would be due on the 1st of next month. Once we cancel the automatic withdrawal, you'll need to make any future payments manually or arrange for alternative payment methods. I understand completely. After signing the necessary paperwork, I felt lighter somehow. The first step had been taken. My next stop was Samuel Wright's law office. Sam had been Robert's friend before becoming our family attorney. He'd handled Robert's will, helped me with the house purchase 8 years ago, and occasionally checked in on me since then. The receptionist, a young woman with bright purple hair, smiled warmly as I entered. "Mrs. Wallace, Mr. Wright is expecting you." Sam rose from behind his desk when I entered, his tall frame now slightly stooped with age. His handshake was as firm as ever. "Virginia, it's good to see you. Though I must admit your call this morning had me concerned." "Thank you for making time, Sam. I need your advice on a legal matter." He gestured for me to sit. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. "The house on Cherry Hill. I want to know my options." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "The mortgage is in your name alone, correct?" "Yes, Gregory and Diane have never contributed, despite our original agreement that they would eventually take over the payments. And now I'm done," I said simply. "I've canceled the automatic payments. I want to know what happens next." Sam leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him. "Well, without payments, the bank will eventually foreclose. However, as the property owner, you have other options. You could sell the house, pay off the remaining mortgage and keep any profit, or you could transfer ownership to Gregory and Diane, but that would require their taking over the mortgage." I considered this. "And if I simply stop paying and don't tell them, the bank will send notices, multiple ones. There's quite a lengthy process before actual foreclosure proceedings begin, typically several months of missed payments. But Virginia," he leaned forward, concern etching his features, "this would affect your credit. And where would you live?" Smiled. "I've been thinking about that. I've always loved those riverfront condos downtown." Sam's eyebrows rose. "The riverside terraces? They're lovely, but not inexpensive." "I've been paying for a house I don't really live in for 8 years, Sam. I can afford it." He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I can help you look into that. But first, let's discuss your immediate options for the Cherry Hill property." For the next hour, Sam and I discussed the legalities of my situation. By the time I left his office, I had a clear understanding of the path forward and the necessary paperwork to make it happen. My final stop was Riverside Terraces, a modern complex overlooking the river that flowed through the heart of downtown. I'd admired the buildings for years, often walking past them on my rare solo outings. The leasing agent, Ms. Powell, showed me a 2-bedroom unit on the 6th floor with a balcony facing the water. The space was open and filled with light, so different from my cramped quarters at the back of Gregory's house. "It's perfect," I said, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows. "When would it be available?" "This unit?" "Immediately. The previous tenant relocated for work last month." I turned to face her. "I'll take it." She blinked, clearly surprised by my decisiveness. "That's wonderful. Shall we head back to the office to start the application process?" "Of course," I said, taking one last look at the view. "I can provide everything you need." By early afternoon, my application was submitted, complete with financial documentation that demonstrated I was more than capable of affording the rent. Ms. Powell assured me I would hear back within a few days. The cab driver who had patiently waited drove me home, though it no longer felt like home. It felt like Gregory and Diane's house, a place where I was merely tolerated. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed Sophie sitting on the front steps waiting. She jumped up as soon as she saw me. "There you are, Grandma. I've been texting." "You all morning." I checked my phone, finding 3 missed messages from her. "I'm sorry, dear. I had my ringer off during my appointments." "Appointments? Mom and Dad said you were just running errands." Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What's going on?" I patted her hand. "Nothing for you to worry about. Just some personal business I needed to attend to." She studied my face. "You're planning something, aren't you?" For a moment, I considered confiding in her, but Sophie was still very much her parents' daughter, and I couldn't risk my plans being derailed. Let's just say I'm taking care of myself for a change. Does this have anything to do with what happened at graduation? Because I was just joking about the witch thing. Everyone thought it was funny. "Did they?" I asked quietly. "Did you?" "Did I think it was funny?" Sophie repeated, her smile faltering. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "I mean, everyone laughed. That's not what I asked," I said gently. Sophie looked down at her hands. "I didn't really think about it, Grandma. It's just something Mom and Dad say sometimes." Chill ran through me. "Your parents call me a witch?" She bit her lip, clearly regretting having mentioned it. Not exactly. It's more like, when you're not around, they sometimes refer to your room as the witch's quarters. Dad started it after you decorated my room with Harry Potter stuff that one time. I nodded slowly, keeping my expression neutral despite the sting. I see. I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't think it would hurt your feelings. I patted her hand. Don't worry about it. Why don't we go inside? The rest of the day passed quietly. Gregory and Diane barely noticed my return, both absorbed in their own activities. I retreated to my quarters, organizing my papers and making notes about what I would need to pack when the time came. That evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Wallace? This is Jennifer Powell from Riverside Terraces. I have good news. Your application has been approved. We can sign the lease as early as tomorrow if you're available. I smiled, a weight lifting from my shoulders. That would be perfect. Thank you. After hanging up, I sat on my bed, staring at the small space that had been my home for the past 8 years. The walls seemed to close in around me, the reality of what I was about to do both terrifying and exhilarating. There was no turning back now. The next morning, I returned to Riverside Terraces to sign the lease. The unit would be mine starting the following Monday, less than a week away. As I toured the apartment one more time, I felt a surge of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. Will you need help with moving? Ms. Powell asked as we completed the paperwork. Yes, I think I will, I replied, realizing I hadn't considered the logistics. She handed me a business card. This moving company offers special rates for our tenants. They're very reliable, especially with seniors. The word senior made me pause. Was that how the world saw me now? A fragile old woman who needed special accommodations? But then I remembered Diane's comments about my hip, about how I couldn't manage shopping trips or contribute to conversations about modern life. If my family saw me as elderly and useless, perhaps I could use that perception to my advantage. Stopped by a furniture store on the way home, selecting essential pieces for my new apartment. A comfortable bed, a dining table with 4 chairs, optimistically hoping for visitors, a sofa, and a reading chair for the balcony. The sales associate arranged for everything to be delivered and set up on Monday. Moving or redecorating? She asked cheerfully. Starting over, I replied, which earned me a knowing smile. When I returned to the house, I found a certified letter waiting for me. Inside was confirmation from Sam that all the legal paperwork had been filed. The mortgage cancellation was official, and I now had formal documentation of my sole ownership of the Cherry Hill property. I tucked the letter into my purse just as Gregory walked in. Hey, Mom, been out again? His tone was casual, but I detected a hint of curiosity. Just taking care of some business, I replied. What kind of business keeps you out 2 days in a row? He was trying to sound concerned rather than suspicious, but I knew my son too well. Nothing for you to worry about. How was your day? He shrugged, effectively dismissed. Same as always. Meetings, emails, more meetings. He hesitated, then added, By the way, Diane and I were talking about your space. My heart skipped a beat. Had they somehow discovered my plans? Oh? Yeah, we think it might be time to update it a bit. Make it more suitable. He cleared his throat. For someone your age. Suitable how? I asked, careful to keep my voice neutral. Well, the shower could use some safety rails, and maybe one of those emergency call buttons, just in case you fall and no one's home. I bit back a laugh. They weren't planning to move me to assisted living. They were planning to turn my quarters into one. That's thoughtful of you, I said, but unnecessary. I'm quite capable of taking care of myself. Gregory patted my shoulder condescendingly. We know you think that, Mom, but we worry. Besides, it's not just for you, it's for the future. The future. When I was gone and they could finally claim the space as their home gym or whatever Diane had in mind. I'll think about it, I said, eager to end the conversation. Over the next few days, I carefully sorted through my belongings when no one was around. I packed photos, keepsakes, and important documents into boxes that I stored in the back of my closet. I ordered new linens for my future apartment and arranged for utilities to be connected on Monday. No one noticed my preparations. Gregory and Diane were too absorbed in their own lives, and Sophie spent most of her time with friends, savoring her last days before moving to Chicago. On Friday evening, 3 days before my planned move, we had a rare family dinner together. Diane had ordered an elaborate meal from an upscale restaurant, a treat that I was expected to appreciate despite my preference for home-cooked food. So, Sophie, Diane said as we ate, should we go over your packing list for Chicago again? Sophie groaned. Mom, we've been over it a dozen times. I just want to make sure you're prepared, Diane insisted. It's a big change, living on your own. I smiled slightly at this. Sophie wouldn't be on her own. Diane had arranged for her to live with the daughter of one of her friends, in an apartment paid for largely by Gregory and Diane. But the irony of discussing Sophie's independence while planning my dependence wasn't lost on me. Speaking of changes, Gregory interjected. Mom, we were thinking of starting those renovations to your space next week. Nothing major, just some safety updates. I set down my fork. Next week might not be the best time. Diane frowned. Why not? You'll hardly notice the work. It'll just be a day or two. Actually, I said carefully, I had plans. Plans? Gregory echoed as if the concept of me having plans was utterly foreign. Yes. I thought I might visit Barbara for a few days. Diane's eyebrows shot up. Barbara, from your teaching days? Doesn't she live across town? She does. We've been talking about having a little, what do you call it, Sophie? A girls' trip? Sophie grinned. That sounds awesome, Grandma. Gregory and Diane exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Well, Diane said finally, I suppose the renovations can wait until you get back. I nodded, taking a sip of water to hide my smile. They wouldn't be renovating anything, but they didn't need to know that. Not yet. On Sunday night, with my bag secretly packed and hidden in my closet, I sat on my bed one last time, looking around at the space that had been my prison for 8 years. Tomorrow, everything would change. Monday morning arrived with a sense of finality. I woke before dawn, my heart racing with anticipation and a touch of fear. This was it, the day I reclaimed my life. I dressed quickly and quietly, listening for any signs that the rest of the household was stirring. Silence greeted me. Gregory and Diane wouldn't be up for another hour, and Sophie was likely to sleep until noon, as she often did during breaks. My few remaining possessions were already in suitcases and boxes hidden in my closet. I had intentionally left behind most of the furniture and household items Gregory and Diane had provided over the years, tired, secondhand pieces they considered good enough for me. At precisely 7 a.m., my phone vibrated with a text from Barbara. I'm outside. I had asked Barbara to help me with this final step, knowing I couldn't manage alone. She had insisted on being part of what she called my prison break. I quietly wheeled my suitcases to the back door, wincing at every small sound. The door? Hinges, thankfully, didn't squeak as I eased it open and stepped outside for the last time. Barbara was waiting in her blue sedan, engine running. She popped the trunk and helped me load my belongings. Ready for your new life? She whispered. Giving me a quick hug, I nodded, too emotional to speak. I took one last look at the house. The one I had helped buy. The one where I had lived as a second-class citizen for 8 years. Let's go, I said finally. We drove to Riverside Terraces in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we pulled into the parking garage, I felt a strange lightness, as if I'd shed a heavy cloak I'd been wearing for years. Ms. Powell met us in the lobby with keys and paperwork. Welcome home, Mrs. Wallace, she said with a warm smile, handing me a small welcome basket. The movers arrived promptly at 8:30 a.m., efficiently bringing up the furniture I had purchased. By noon, my new apartment was taking shape. Not fully decorated, but functional and, most importantly, mine. It's perfect, Barbara declared, surveying the space as we unpacked kitchen items. I'm so proud of you, Virginia. I smiled, placing my favorite teacup in the cabinet. I still can't quite believe I did it. Well, believe it. You've taken back control of your life. She paused, a concerned look crossing her face. What happens when they figure it out? I sighed, having thought about this extensively. They'll be angry, of course, but legally there's nothing they can do. The house is in my name. I've stopped making mortgage payments, and I've left documentation explaining everything. Documentation? Barbara raised an eyebrow. I nodded toward my briefcase. A letter to each of them. I'll mail them tomorrow, after I've had one night in my new home. By mid-afternoon, the apartment was as settled as it could be for the first day. Barbara helped me hang a few pictures, arranged my books on the shelves, and set up my small desk by the window overlooking the river. How does dinner at my place sound? She asked. We should celebrate. That would be lovely, I agreed. But first, I need to check my phone. I turned it off this morning to avoid any interruptions. I powered on my device, and it immediately erupted with notifications. 6 missed calls from Gregory, 3 from Diane, and a dozen text messages from both of them, increasing in urgency. Mom, where are you? Are you okay? Call us immediately. We're getting worried. This isn't funny, Mom. We're calling the police if we don't hear from you soon. The last message had come just 20 minutes ago. I showed Barbara the screen. They noticed, I said dryly. Sooner than you expected? Much sooner. I thought I'd have at least until tonight. I hesitated, finger hovering over the screen. I should call them back. Barbara squeezed my shoulder. You don't have to. Not until you're ready. I shook my head. No, I need to do this now. Otherwise, they really might call the police, and that would just complicate things. I took a deep breath and dialed Gregory's number. He answered on the first ring. Mom, where the hell are you? His voice was tight with what sounded like genuine concern. I'm fine, Gregory. There's no need to worry. No need to worry? You disappear without a word, and we're supposed to not worry? We thought you might have fallen or gotten lost, or... I didn't disappear, I interrupted calmly. I moved out. A long silence followed. Then, you what? I moved out. I've been planning it for some time now. Planning. He sounded confused, then suspicious. Is this about what Sophie said at graduation? Because that was just a joke, Mom. You're taking this way too seriously. I closed my eyes, his dismissive tone reinforcing my decision. This isn't about Sophie. This is about 8 years of being treated as if I don't matter in my own home. What? Are you talking about? We gave you a place to live. We included you in our family. You gave me a converted sunroom and treated me like a boarder, one who paid all the bills but had no say in anything. Gregory's voice lowered. Where are you? Somewhere safe. Somewhere I'm respected. Mom, this is ridiculous. Just tell me where you are and I'll come get you. I sighed. I'm not coming back, Gregory. I've made my decision. You can't just... He stopped abruptly. Wait, what did you mean about paying the bills? Ah, there it was. Not concern for my well-being, but worry about the financial implications. You'll find out soon enough. I've written everything down in a letter that you'll receive tomorrow. What letter? Mom, you're not making sense. Just come home and we can talk about whatever's bothering you. It's not my home anymore, Gregory. It never really was. My voice remained steady despite the emotion welling up inside me. I have to go now. Please tell Sophie I love her. Mom. Wait. I ended the call, my hand trembling slightly. Barbara wordlessly handed me a glass of water. That was harder than I expected, I admitted. But you did it, she said firmly. And you did it on your terms. My phone began ringing again almost immediately. This time it was Diane. I declined the call. They'll keep calling, Barbara warned. I know, but I've said what I needed to say for now. The letters will explain the rest. The 3 letters sat in my briefcase, each addressed to a different family member. Gregory's was the longest, detailing the financial arrangements and my reasons for leaving. Diane's was briefer, focused on the years of subtle disrespect and exclusion. Sophie's was the hardest to write, a mixture of love, disappointment, and hope that she might learn from her parents' mistakes. Each included the same closing paragraph. I still love you, but I have finally learned to love myself more. I deserve better than to be the witch who lives in the back of the house. As Barbara and I prepared to leave for dinner, my phone chimed with a text from Sophie. Grandma, what's going on? Dad is freaking out. Are you okay? Please call me. I hesitated, then replied, I'm fine, dear. I'll explain everything soon. Love you. I turned off my phone and slipped it into my purse. Tomorrow would bring a storm, but tonight was for celebrating my freedom. Ready? Barbara asked, holding the door. I took one last look around my new apartment. Spacious, bright, and filled with promise. Ready, I answered, stepping into my future. 3 weeks passed in a blur of discovery and adjustment. My new apartment gradually became a home, filled with items I had chosen myself. I hung colorful artwork on walls that were mine to decorate. I placed fresh flowers on the dining table because I wanted to, not because I was trying to please anyone else. The first week was the hardest. Gregory called incessantly after receiving my letter, his messages evolving from confusion to anger to desperate bargaining. You can't just stop paying the mortgage, he had shouted during one particularly heated call. What are we supposed to? Do? You could start by paying for your own house, I had replied calmly, something most adults do. Diane had taken a different approach, sending long, guilt-laden texts about how I had abandoned the family, how Sophie was devastated by my selfishness. I read each message but responded to none of them. The bank had sent the first notice of missed payment just as Sam had predicted. Gregory forwarded a photo of it to me with a single word. Seriously? But by the second week, something shifted. The desperate calls slowed, then stopped entirely. I suspected reality had finally set in. They would need to either take over the mortgage or move. Sophie was the only one who maintained contact, though. Our exchanges were tentative at first. I don't understand why you left, she had written in her first message after receiving my letter. I think you do, I had replied. You just don't want to admit it. A few days later, she asked if she could visit. I hesitated, worried she might be coming as her parents' emissary, but I couldn't bear to refuse her. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, eyes wide as she took in my new apartment. Wow, Grandma, she said, turning slowly to survey the space. This is amazing. Thank you, dear. Would you like some tea? We sat on my balcony, overlooking the river where sailboats glided past. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her cup. Dad and Mom are really upset, she finally said. They think you've lost your mind. I smiled slightly. And what do you think? She hesitated, then met my gaze. I think I never realized how they treated you. Not really. She swallowed hard. I read your letter like 10 times. And then I started noticing things, how they talk about you when you're not around, how they always made decisions without asking you. And yet you were surprised when I left. She nodded, looking down. I always thought you were okay with everything. You never complained. That was my mistake, I admitted. I should have spoken up long ago. Sophie was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry about the witch thing. It was mean, and I knew it when I said it. She trailed off, tears forming. I wanted them to think I was funny. I reached across the table to take her hand. I know, dear. We all do foolish things to gain approval. Like paying for a house for people who don't appreciate you? She asked, a hint of her old cheekiness returning. I laughed. Exactly like that. By the third week, real changes began. Sophie reported that Gregory and Diane had listed the house for sale, unable to qualify for a mortgage on their own. They had found a 3-bedroom apartment closer to Gregory's office, significantly smaller than the house, but affordable on their combined salaries. Dad had to cancel their Cancun trip, Sophie confided during another visit. Mom was furious. I felt a small, vindictive satisfaction at this news, which I quickly suppressed. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. Sophie left for Chicago that weekend, but not before extracting a promise that I would visit her in the fall. For the first time, she hugged me without restraint, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Grandma." As she left, alone, again, I settled into a rhythm of my own making. I joined a book club that met at the local library. I took a watercolor class at the community center. I reconnected with old colleagues from my teaching days, many of whom were delighted to discover I was living downtown. 1 month after my move, Gregory called. It was the first time I'd heard from him directly in weeks. "The house sold," he said without preamble. "Over asking price." "That's good news," I replied neutrally. A long pause. "We're moving next weekend." Another pause. I was wrong, Mom. I blinked, unprepared for this admission. "About what?" "About everything. How we treated you. What we expected from you." His voice grew strained. "I've had to face some hard truths these past few weeks." I said nothing, allowing him the space to continue. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said finally, "but I wanted you to know that I understand why you did what you did." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was more self-awareness than I'd heard from my son in years. "Thank you for telling me," I said simply. Maybe we could have lunch sometime, just us?" I considered his request. "I'd like that, Gregory, but on one condition." "What's that?" "We meet as equals, not as a son humoring his elderly mother, but as two adults who respect each other." The silence stretched for several seconds. Then, "I think I can manage that." After we hung up, I stepped onto my balcony, watching the sunset paint the river in shades of gold and crimson. A gentle breeze carried the scent of late summer flowers from the planters I had carefully arranged. At 70 years old, I had finally learned to stand up for myself. It had cost me a house but gained me a home. It had strained family ties but strengthened the ones worth keeping. To think, it had all started with a thoughtless insult at a graduation ceremony. The witch who lives in the back of the house. Smiled to myself. If being a witch meant having the power to transform my life, then perhaps it wasn't such a bad thing to be after all.